I just need to double check for it.
Thank you, Leo.
I hope so.
And thank you for checking in absentia last night.
I
That was
watched.
awesome.
We're good.
All right, today is Wednesday, March 18th, 2026. This is a Personnel, Finance, and Auxiliary Services Committee meeting of the School District of Menominee Falls Board of Education. There is a possibility that a quorum of the full membership of the Board of Education may be in attendance at board committee meetings. There will be no full board action taken at any board committee meeting. Only members of the committee may vote on any item on the agenda. The live broadcast will be streamed on the school district's YouTube page. To watch the recorded meeting, please visit the School District of Menominee Falls YouTube site. Time is 5:16 and we are located at the Village Hall Upper Level Conference Room 3344 and 45 at W156 and 8480 Pilgrim Road in Menominee Falls. Was this meeting properly posted?
Yes.
Okay. Alright, at this time, I'm looking for a motion to approve the February 16th Personnel, Finance, and Auxiliary Services Committee meeting minutes as presented.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Alright, motion to approve the minutes passes. At this time, we'll go into our first discussion item, the 2026-27 preliminary budget assumptions and forecast projections.
Okay. So this document you're looking at in front of you and attached on board docs is very similar to the last time we were here a month ago. There are some changes, so I'll review those. I'll go at a high level over the gist of this and starting with the key challenges, which really have not changed since last time. And I'll start by saying these are not just affecting our school district, this is affecting school districts across the state from decisions the state has made within their budget. So two of the key factors affecting us are the state special ed reimbursement rate, so far from what was included in the state biennial budget for 26-27, which is the budget year that we're looking at, is 45% is included in the budget, but we're projecting a 38%. So currently, the state is saying 30 for the current year. 35% is what districts are likely to receive, though what's in the state budget is 42%. So we're always careful to be conservative when we're projecting that, but far lower than districts are used to receiving from the state. And then the other piece that's significant for our district is personal property aid revenue, which was removed in 25-26. So the total of those two pieces was $1.5 million in reduced revenues that we're working through that affect future budgets as well. State per pupil revenue limits not keeping up with inflation, so for the 17th consecutive year, districts received a per pupil increase that's lower than inflation. So for us and for districts across the state, that increase per pupil is $325, so that's what we have included in our budget assumptions for next year. The state also did not offset the per pupil increases with an inflation in general school aid, so there's been a lot of conversation at the state level about what that means. Essentially, that's created an increase in property taxes for districts across the state. So not putting money, we call it like on the other side of the formula. We have the 325, but there was no increase in the aid bucket, if you will, that essentially that increase then went to taxpayers. A piece that's specific to our district, but really not, is experiencing declining resident membership. So that means we get essentially less revenue, but 82% of districts across the state are in that boat. So that's a factor that many districts, majority of districts across the state are in, and the funding formula benefits districts that are in increasing enrollment or resident membership. So when we're in that declining scenario, it means we get less revenue. So that's a challenge for us. And then in addition, our open enrollment pattern is essentially decreasing. Our ins are decreasing and our outs are increasing, which is netting us a cost, a net expense that's greater each year than the prior year. Our board did vote to open 21 new seats at the high school level, at the 9th grade level in January. So that is bringing an additional $230,000 in revenue if all of those seats are filled. So that means the net cost would come down to approximately $330,000. So that's a significant line item for our budget. So next, the bottom section here with the preliminary budget outlook. We'll go into like the actual line items in future meetings, we'll go through them at a high level, but what you might notice here is that essentially our initial preliminary budget difference is larger than we spoke last time. And there's a few pieces that that's a result of. So as we move forward from winter into spring and then into summer and then the fall and projecting our budget, we make sure that we have the most accurate information we have. And so now following the February 28th teacher retirement deadline, we do know a big piece of this number is our retirements. So while that does present generally a savings with our retiree and attrition with our new hire salaries, it also does come with an expense because we have a retiree a retirement benefit plan. So that increase there is almost $400,000 from the initial budget projections to now that we know our actual retirements. Another increase that we have now included in the budget is our sped actual costs and revenue based on 8 projections. So there's a lot of work that goes into the complexities of how you project your aid for the next year. Aid is year delayed, so it's always based on the prior year's expenses. So we have special ed costs up approximately $250,000. And then also the final change from the last time we talked, which is just affecting essentially our initial budget projections, the initial position is health insurance premiums. So a few more people on our plan results in approximately $250,000 more dollars. So it could be only 9 or 10 people more on a family plan, and that's a $250,000 cost. So the combination of those things is why you're seeing the difference number larger than it was last time. So those are the 3 big pieces.
Do you know about what percent that 250K for special ed is? Is that like a 10% jump, is that a 2% jump?
As a whole, for special ed, do I have it up top of my head?
If you don't, that's, I was just trying to figure out that.
I don't, but I absolutely can get that number for you.
Correct. One of the big things at the state level, there's quite a bit of conversation and potential bills I saw come out yesterday on both sides of the aisle that would impact some of this. So there's still negotiations going on as it relates to a couple of different things. Special ed money is still being talked about on both sides of the aisle and in the governor's office. I shot an article over to Caitlin today that there was a proposal out there for 60%, I don't think that'll happen, special education reimbursement. But there's proposals out there for 45% and to change things to actually the money that they say. So I think those sorts of things are possible and more realistic than what came out in an article in NPR from the Democrats. They're looking for 60% from special ed reimbursements in actual dollars. That came out today. There's some other things, the 325 is being talked about, there's a lot of negotiations, so I think things are possible still. They're still talking, they're still there. They do have some of these factors right in front of them, which is unheard of. We're in the middle of a biennium. That usually that sort of thing isn't talked about right now. But I think there's acknowledgement that something needs to occur. You know, so what that is or if it happens before the governor's election, we don't know.
We don't know.
So with this, okay, so for the 25-26 school year, it was told 42% reimbursement for special education. And you had conservatively budgeted 38%, and then we got 35%. So now going into 26-27, and I realize what you just said, Mr. Munoz, is happening, but they were saying 45%. So what kind of advice or how are your people talking about what percentage to assume?
So the bucket at the state level, like the special ed aid bucket, has increased from 25-26 to 26-27.
Okay.
So we rely on the experts in the state, so that's like your Baird, for example, that we, like our budget model is our Baird budget model. There's a few other groups like that take a look, because all of this data that we have is publicly reported. Like all of our special ed numbers are publicly reported. Now we're reporting them on a regular basis through state portal systems, the WISE systems. Whereas it used to just be like, you do your budget report in the beginning of the year, and then you do your annual report in September, and so everything was just super delayed. Now it's more live, so those who have the ability to like analyze all of this data can say, okay, we're seeing costs in the current year as budgeted, because we present our budgets. So they're like in line with budgets, and then saying that, okay, if everybody spends what their budget was for special ed for Fund 27, then the state bucket at this whatever $1 billion amount would support a 38% or 38.2. So what we're hearing right now is 38.2. I have 38% built in, which is 7% lower than the 45. Like that's such a still, it's a far cry from being fully funded. But so just, and then we're hearing that from the experts that are looking at the overall numbers that districts are reporting for special ed projections, and then discussions amongst each other, like what number are you using? So
Right.
38% is very much the
Okay.
norm.
But there's not like a district who's like, I hear 38, but I might budget 35.
I mean, they could.
I
But-
just didn't know, like based on how unprecedented this was, are people feeling even more, or are they like,
The professional advice we receive, I mean, Baird is,
Yeah.
they're pretty, they don't represent or work with all the districts, but my previous district, it was the same Baird folks.
Mhm.
You know, when I see them at conferences, it's like, oh, hey, I remember you, and, you know, it's the same
Mhm.
folks that are giving the advice to districts all over the state.
Okay.
So we can take that best advice, but some people could budget less.
It's hard too, because like you can budget less, but there's not a lot of extra room in budgets these
Right.
days, so you don't wanna
go too low
go
and be
to,
like,
and now you're
"Sorry."
peeling way back on program cuts because
Right.
there's simply nowhere else to go.
Mhm.
So it's like you wanna be conservative, but you also wanna be accurate,
Yeah,
you know, that's the goal.
And the
Yeah.
timelines for what we're gonna be getting to on the staffing side is that
Mhm.
we have certain timelines with everybody's contracts that we have to make those decisions in. So there's some, that's a moving piece that we're, you know, which is why we're gonna, you know, from here on out, we'll be starting to move quick with the staffing plan. Right to the board, right for approvals, and it'll become a living document, but those sorts of things, that's why they're all connected. And that's why it's unprecedented, they're talking about it right now, and we would need to know now.
Mhm.
But so do all districts.
Right.
They have the same timelines as we do.
thank you.
So I won't go through all the assumptions, but they're listed, and the new one that you're seeing on there is the retiree payments now that we know are actuals for 26-27. Retiree payments start the September following.
Can I ask about the substitute budget? It says
Yes.
it's flat. So I know we had that study, and I believe that was from the previous year. So so the one that we're using now and saying it's flat for next year, is that down for, like,
No.
have we done any kind of management on that? Cause that was pretty eye-opening, like we
Yeah.
are a huge outlier
Yes.
and spending a ton more, so we're still gonna be, when we say flat, it's still gonna be.
From the higher number. It's still from the higher number. That doesn't mean, that's not necessarily reflective of like the work that's been done.
Okay.
I would say that's a conservative approach, and we do know that our fee is flat, and the fee that, like the on top fee that we have to pay the company that does the services, that's flat, so go ahead, you got-
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that I guess really more Caitlin did was all the principals now see their sub-budget
right.
and what they're spending. Because before it was just in one general fund, they didn't know. And so I think one of the things is actually seeing your expenditure gives you a little bit better sense of, you know, what's going on. So I think that's been helpful. You know what, I can probably bring it to the next meeting. We have a meeting with them, and right now we are doing better this year. So we are actually starting to see, like I said though, it's always like a month behind, you know, but as of right now, we are on track to spend less money than we did last year. And it's trending well enough that we feel good about that, so the conversations that we've had seem to have helped. And now that people can actually see, like their own checkbook, you know, the money that's coming out of that line, I think that really helped as well. And I know principals have mentioned it to me, that they've been keeping an eye on that number and trying to do more to keep it lower, so.
Yeah, that's uncommon, it's good that we did that. In most districts that I've been in, it works in the same way that we used to do it. In other words, if you need a sub, you just put in for a sub and district office just handles it in this big subbing pool. But, you know, we had some discussions about it actually after the meetings last year. We made a change, we made a substantial change about saying, okay, all the principals, people that need subs, here's your allotment, here are the dollars, stay in the black. And I think they have,
Yes,
they
yes.
have. So why don't we bring the report back to the next meeting, we can get some
Yeah.
empirical data in front of you.
Yeah, she can pull together kind of what she did for us last year. The folks from, it's now Kelly Services, not Teachers on Demand. But
Oh, that's-
same, they're the same, Kelly kind of took them over in a bigger way. Teachers on Call was like a subsidiary of Kelly Services, now they're just Kelly Services. But they're all the same people. So yes, we can bring that and she can put together kind of what she did for us to show those comparisons with the two more districts and stuff. But we actually are on track
Yes, we
to
are.
not spend as much money as we did last year. And, you know, one of the things though is with schools, you know, you don't wanna be overly punitive either because one school might have had 4 people who go out on FMLA and, you know, there's really nothing they can do about that. They can help manage, you know, our professional development in district meetings, in building meetings. You know, there are some things that are within their control. But you know, unfortunately, like if Shady Lane gets hit with 4 FMLAs and Ben Franklin gets hit with 0, you know, Ben Franklin's just naturally gonna do better. And there's really nothing Shady Lane could have done to, you know, prevent that. So there still are a lot of things that are outside people's control.
I get that, but there are some things that
Oh yeah, and then
we had talked about some of those and I
And then I think three principals definitely talked to me about how each month at a staff meeting, they do kind of mention, now remember, it's really critical that we're here, you know, do everything you can to try to schedule your appointments, you know, outside of the teaching day, you know, those kinds of things. We're trying to be flexible with lunch and prep time, you know, for things like that, so they do seem to be making it a part of a more regular conversation. I know one of the principal talks about, my dentist is open on Saturdays, I go to the dentist on Saturday, you know, with my family. So, not that people wanna spend their weekend going to the dentist, that sounds torturous, but they seem to be more engaged in the conversation about subs. And from right now, it's working.
I have a question about the 8% health insurance increase. I know, was it about a year ago, we had the huge RX spend. I think it would impact us like what, one point some million dollars? Yeah,
Yeah.
how are we doing with that? How's that change? And
So
how's
that just happened, January 1 was the actual
Okay.
change. How was it? Well, it's a smidge rocky in the beginning. Mostly just from, you know, oddly enough, not the things we thought were gonna be problematic. So the things we thought would be problematic or more difficult weren't at all. And then for whatever reason, this other area really popped. And I think it took about a month to get it all fully sorted. But right now, we seem to be doing really well. People seem to have been moved over into all of these new programs. Things that we expect to be covered are being covered. That was like a little hiccup. There are so many medications. So there was part of a list that didn't make it into the preventative care list. And apparently a lot of people are on those. So we had a little hiccup until we could figure out what the heck that was. Because none of us could figure out why they weren't being covered, but everybody has been reimbursed. We are now moving smoothly, and our high cost people on the specialty drugs have all been through the process now, because the grandfathering window is coming to its end. So they've all been in there. You know, is everybody happy? No. No, everybody's not happy. But quite honestly, everybody wasn't happy on the other plan and then the plan before that.
Sure.
So, I can never guarantee perfect happiness. We do still have that, I think, Caitlin already took it, the $600,000 in savings in this contract, they guarantee, it was 26%, but I think it equates to about $600,000. And it's guaranteed, so even if they can't do it, they gotta pay it, so, we expect them to be able to do it though. And so we're hoping that that has, the impact that we believe it will have, cause like I said, it just started in January. And then everything's also like a month delayed in reporting, so we don't have a ton of data. But
So this 8% health insurance increase takes that savings from RX into consideration.
Yes.
And it's still an 8% increase
So
in
what
health.
we
so this is more like in the general med area too now,
Right.
so this is more in your medical, not your RX.
Okay,
So
They're
in
not combined
RX, we are seeing, those savings. However, on the medical side, where we're actually doing pretty well, comparatively. The projection of the 8% is just the expected increase of medical costs nationally,
market trend.
market trend.
Okay.
And so, we kind of have to use that.
So even in our meeting, just yesterday
Yes.
with USI, Scott's words, our rep that we work with, his words were, if we are on budget, if our current year comes in exactly on budget, we could expect to see a 10% increase the following year, because that's just market trend in health insurance right now, so.
It is a little frustrating because, we moved to the Nexus ACO like 2 years ago where, we found savings. And so you find, 15% in savings, but then the cost of services go up 10, in the next year. So now you can't keep that 15% every year. Now it's down to maybe you're hoping, you're still in that 5% where you were from the year before. And then now this year it's 8. And at some point, it kind of becomes very difficult. So we really hoped to make a significant impact in our spend in the pharmacy side. With this change to Smith RX, we do believe we'll realize that. Unfortunately, every year, we will be having the conversation about increased medical spend, no matter what we're putting into place. And, at some point, you want to avoid it, and we haven't been there yet. But some districts do have to make the decision earlier than we will. Do we start hitting our actual plan design, the things we cover, and at what level we cover them, if we cover them at all? And then that has some real significant negative impact on the people you're covering, when you choose to do that. So we're not there yet, but every budget, you're gonna see a number somewhere between 6 and 12% as market trend. No matter what really almost no matter what we do.
Right, it's unfortunate when you make changes and it just negates that, so you're like at 0, it's like you're not even in a savings territory.
Right.
You're just negating your market increase.
You realize it for like this blip
Yep.
in time. Yeah, so, I like to have a stable, I tell Caitlin and our reps, that I like to have a stable year in between a year of change, just, I don't know, for everyone's mental sanity, I guess. Right now, I feel like we can still do that for one more year, but the following year, yes, we'll probably have to be looking at something else. What else is there to do? So, we shall see.
Another thing I wanted to ask about is we've heard directly from staff educators about the need for a salary schedule, and I just didn't know, is that feedback reflected in this preliminary budget, or is it being considered at this time?
Yeah, so we have one and we'll be reviewing it. Julie's done a bunch of work on that. So we have CPI in our budget, not more than that. So essentially a salary schedule would have to equate to the same in order to be in our budget. So that's the work that we did last year, where we kind of presented, like worked with the union to come up with an option that was equating to the same amount that CPI would be.
So the salary schedule we offered last year and the union chose not to pursue was a good salary schedule. It raised a lot of things, but it was within the CPI.
The
So
bucket of the money,
the bucket of
Okay.
money.
but not everybody would get CPI.
Right, correct.
So year one is always the hard year and
To get onto the schedule.
the WEAC rep, you know, not just our folks. The WEAC rep who does it in multiple school districts did acknowledge that they also take ownership of that messaging and explaining it. The year one of implementation on a salary schedule is, I mean, even if you had pie in the sky kinds of money, it's still not gonna be,
Can't give everybody the
It's not
same
the same.
percentage
Yeah,
and
so like-
it's still
because
iron
they're
out
always
the
going to
problem.
put you on the step closest to where you are. And that could be $5, that could be $500. So in that first year to get placed on your step, you get placed on the closest highest step, you don't go backwards. But just depending on where you happen to be in that spread, that first year, everybody is not realizing kind of the same thing. But then in year two, you should be stabilized, where people receive whatever combination of things you have. Do you have a step and CPI? What do you have? Everybody should be realizing the same then, but year one, no matter what, is always your transition year. So Julie and I are meeting, we carved out some time over spring break when it's kind of quiet, to really finalize what we can offer as a salary schedule. And
Also want to be clear that the feedback was heard last year and we created a salary schedule. So we heard the feedback last year and said, we agree, we want a salary schedule for the union. So we spent 40 to 80 hours creating one and
grade two,
we created a lot of several different
by
options
person.
with actual dollar amounts. So we heard that last year, created multiple salary schedules, and it's okay in the negotiating process that it wasn't desired. But I wanna be clear with the messaging. We heard last year, so yeah, we understand that, you know, it's the same thing this year as we heard last year. And we're happy to work inside of those confines again and do what we can.
Well, don't you think, can it be assumed that it potentially will get to the same ending?
No,
Well, so,
because there's people have retired. So we actually did it by each individual, in order to get completely accurate about the dollars, you have to use every actual person, their actual salaries.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, because there's other ways to do this, you know, which we don't wanna do, you know, which is, you know, but we're looking at people's actual salaries, which is in and of itself beneficial to the employee. You know, because that's not the way that every district does it, that's not what's required by the law. But we're happy to concede that, and also that we want a salary schedule too. And we showed that good faith last year. We're willing to show.
So what was the piece that was missing?
So, since we are noticed to talk about these things in closed, I have a couple things I'd like to say, but I prefer to say them in closed.
I just wanna be clear that we heard this year, but we also heard last year, and we took that work forward and put a great deal of effort. You know, several here were on the negotiating committee, we know that we did that. So we heard that last year, I'm certain it's the same thing this year, and we're all for it.
And we did do it by person, so the handout, I mean, that wasn't public to everybody, but to the leadership, the union leadership, it was like, they could see what each person was gonna get.
Every dollar.
You know, like the real implementation of it. But like I said, I think we can pause some things I have to say in closed session.
Yeah, there's some bigger things that would affect that, I mean, which we can talk about in closed, we're noticed to talk about it.
I just wanted to bring it up because it was brought to the full board then, and then my mind goes to like, there's gotta be a reason that if one was presented that they voted no,
So that's something I wanna talk about
Yeah, yeah,
closed,
we can,
but I don't really wanna throw anybody under the bus publicly.
yeah, we can, we're happy to talk about that
So-
in court.
You know,
I
cause
just-
if they're asking for one and you're saying we offered one,
We did,
why would they keep asking for one? Cause so to me, it makes me think it's like
Because I have an answer for
perception.
yeah, we can.
Like their salary schedule, but what's your definition versus their?
I have an answer
Yeah,
for
we
that.
we have great answers to all those sorts of questions, but it's certainly not good faith bargaining for us to, on camera, to talk about that in public. I just wanna be clear that we heard last year, meaning several members of the board that are on the negotiating committee, that were sitting here and some that aren't sitting here, and we went forward with, you know, a lot of work, not by me, but by these ladies and those that work for them, building it according to each individual person. And it was great work. And it's okay, it wasn't desired. Yeah,
We can talk about it.
I know we said we weren't gonna go through line by
That's
point by point, but
Yeah,
we
that's-
basically all went by.
Sure, that's
Um,
whatever you
so-
need.
I'm gonna add just cause it's the biggest number, I mean, not in total dollars, I'm sure, but the 12% increase of transportation, I assume. So, I mean, we're beholden to our transportation partners, but I guess, is that more general busing driven, or is that like, you know, special like
Sure,
you explain sometimes we provide transportation for certain students in certain situations or for special needs and things like that,
yeah,
and
this
so-
is not special ed, this is just a regular ed busing.
Okay,
So our contract was way under market trend for transportation. And so we're moving into the third year of a 5-year agreement.
Okay.
And we essentially scaled it, and I will say, actually, I just reviewed these numbers. We saved as a whole in our over 3 years, $401,000 in the negotiating of the new contract. Their initial offer was I think it was 20%, it was more than 10%, I wanna say it was 20% in year one, and then maybe it was just kept for the future, so we went back and forth a lot about what was beneficial, and we essentially ended up scaling it, so it was what happened when our actual contract was 8% the first year, 9% the next year, and 12% in 26-27, which essentially saved us those dollars in the first few years.
And we
So-
negotiated that before you were on the board, but that was a positive for us, just based on what all the other companies were getting from other districts, 20% or bigger, so we took the win in terms of, it is a financial win for us. Compared to initial offers, but also what other districts were settling, in terms of their percentages for busing. Cause we don't own our own buses, some districts do, so the money is different then, when you own your own buses, we don't.
And our transportation line item is 2.3 million, so after you go through salaries and benefits, that's one of the next higher
Yeah.
items in our budget. Okay, so opportunities to balance for 26-27, which we will be going into at our next meeting, once some of the staffings information is public, we're just a little bit ahead, so we can't do that just yet. But I do have items listed that I can, so items of significance in order to balance our budget. Reducing capital improvement projects, so we do generally annually have $675,000 for our capital improvement projects, or we call them CIP projects. Right now, we are only doing needs, not wants, so there's no immediate roofing needs in 26-27. Then the one item that's staying in the budget is the Valley View elevator, because that is a need, not a want this time. We talked about our filling of 21 new regular ed open enrollment seats, so that's $230,000 in the budget. We will go through, again, in detail when we can, the positions that are being reduced, but we have leadership positions that are accounted for in our budget savings. And then accounting for a new hire and retiree budget reduction, so now that we have our retirements that were due on February 28th, we have documentation of where we expect to have a new hire, filling those places, those positions come in, and the savings there, so that's over $500,000 that we expect to see from in that category. And then, of course, continuing to align class sizes with within board approved optimal ranges, so we do have always making sure that we are aligning when class sizes are, like right now, we're gonna see a jump at the sixth grade level, but that means there's a reduction at some of the elementaries, so making sure that we're always diligent on aligning our staff with where our students are. And then we do have the other opportunities that we have to balance are the 1.5 million in budget relief in order, that came from not doing all of the district office project right now. So essentially reduce that project by 1.5 million, so that was made available through pausing that second half of the project at this time. And then we do have Fund $73 that we could fund a portion or all of our district's retiree benefits.
For the year.
Yes, for the year. Long-term budget forecast is continuing challenges that are mentioned on the first page. We continue to listen to what's happening at the state level, and hopefully there's changes that are made, but right now, without additional changes, we project multi-million-dollar deficits, budget shortfalls over the next 5 years. So again, we will have detailed information in the spring once it's able to be public. But we continue to, make reductions as we can, utilizing our retirements as we can. Every time there's a staffing change or somebody's leaving or retirement, we're always looking at that position. We don't just immediately assume that we're filling it. We're looking at is this a need?
Yeah, simply put, we're balanced for the 26-27. We're projecting balance for the 26-27. But we've already started work on the 27-28. I mean, we really have effectively. So behind the scenes, we're feeling very confident about the 26-27, but we're trying to do things in the 26-27 that will help us with the 27-28. So we're projecting out, which is good, and that we're able to do that.
I won't go into the information that's on the next 2 pages because we talked about that at length in previous meetings as well. Any other
Question?
questions?
Any other questions from the board? No? Good. Okay. All right, thank you for that information. We'll move to our action items, and for this, I would need a motion to convene into closed session authorized under state statute 19.85 subsection 1 subsection C to discuss employment and compensation, and statute 19.85 section 1 subsection F, considering financial, medical, social, and personal histories or disciplinary action of specific persons, preliminary consideration of specified personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific persons, except where paragraph B applies, which, if discussed in public, would likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data, or involved in such problems or investigations for the purposes of considering a pupil discipline matter.
I will motion that.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?